us here, and also to all the friends who are joining us on Facebook Live. A very, very warm welcome. And I'm Dr. Preeti Kohli from the AHA movement, and I'm absolutely thrilled today to have Robert Schwartz with us here. Friends, I'd like to share that about 4 years back, I came across his book, Your Soul's Gift. And this book has been one of the most healing books for me in my life. I have gone back to it a couple of times, just reading little bits of it again and again. And in this beautiful book, Robert, I would just formally introduce him, but he talks about how he was actually just, he was marketing and communication consultant. And as he says that he was having a very conventional background, conventional education, and how he was looking for deeper meaning. And certain incidents that happened in his life actually opened him to his purpose. How he also mentions in his book that all the challenges that we have in life actually open us to the core purpose that is there of our life. So let me read out his formal bio to you. Rob Schwartz is an American hypnotist who offers between lives soul regressions to help people heal and understand their life plan. In a BLSR, you can speak directly with the Council of Elders, the wise, loving, and highly evolved beings who can tell you what you planned for your current lifetime and why. How well you are fulfilling your plan and how you may better fulfill your plan. They can tell you why certain difficult experiences happened, why certain relationships are so challenging, and how best to respond to those experiences and relationships. Rob's first book, Your Soul's Plan, Discovering the Real Meaning of the Life That You Planned Before You Were Born, explores the pre-birth planning of physical illness, having disabled children, deafness, blindness, drug addiction, alcoholism, the death of a loved one, and accidents. His second book, Your Soul's Gift, The Healing Power of the Life You Planned Before You Were Born, explores the pre-birth planning of spiritual awakening, miscarriage, abortion, suicide, caregiving, sexuality, adoption, and having pets, poverty, mental illness, and other life challenges and experiences. His books have been translated in 25 languages, and he teaches internationally on the subject of pre-birth planning at such venues as the UK, as the United Nations, Kripalu, 1440 Multiversity, and Hollyhock. A warm welcome again, Robert. Thank you so much for joining us. And Rob, today, just starting this conversation, I would first like you to actually share a little about your journey. How did this really, going from that, like you mentioned, a conventional person, doing work that you were doing, how did you actually go to really finding your purpose, getting to the books, and now the work that you're doing? How was this transition?
Well, let me begin just by thanking you for inviting me to be here today. It's a pleasure and an honor for me. And I'd like to mention my website is yoursoulsplan.com. And if people go there, they can read large excerpts from both of the books for free. The path that I took to come here, I think, is an unusual one. I was in the corporate world for a number of years. I did not like that work at all. And I was having really an existential crisis about my life. I felt that there was something else I was here to do, but I didn't know what it was, and I didn't even know how to figure out what it was. And so I tried different things. Nothing was really working. And I thought to myself, okay, I've got to think outside the box here. What can I do to figure out my soul's plan, so to speak? And an idea came to me that I'd never had before, and that was go see a psychic medium. Mediumship is not part of my background. I'm not even sure, I wasn't sure at that time if I believed in it, but I thought, why not? I'll give it a try and I'll see what happens. So I did this back in the year 2003. And we started the session with the medium saying to me, your spirit guides are here. And I said, what's a spirit guide? I'd never even heard of that term before. And she said a guide is a highly evolved non-physical being with whom you plan your life before you're born and who then guides you through your life after you come into body. And then she said your guides would like to speak directly to you, and then she started to channel them. And the first thing they said to me was, you planned your life, including your biggest challenges, before you were born. And I just shook my head and I said, well, why in the world would I have done something like that? And they said, you did this for purposes of spiritual growth. Now, I come from a conventional background. I probably would not have believed anything that they were saying or anything that was happening there. But they then went on to tell me why I had planned all my major challenges. And the impressive thing was that they knew what all of them had been without me telling them. So I had not told the guides anything about myself. I had not told the medium anything about myself before the session started. And yet here were these beings that she was channeling who knew everything about me. And they went through the challenges one by one, and they gave detailed explanations as to why I had planned them before I was born. Well, this rocked my world, so to speak, and I came out of that session just stunned. And I thought about this perspective constantly over the next few days, the next couple of weeks. And what it did for me is that it created quite a deep healing, because it allowed me to see deeper meaning in experiences that previously I thought was just pointless suffering. And then I thought, well, if this perspective can create this kind of healing for me, surely it can create a similar kind of healing for other people. And that was when I first started to think about writing a book on the subject. And then once I started with that kind of thinking, the universe started bringing to me experiences that I would need in order to write a book on that subject. The most powerful of which was an experience of divine love, unconditional love for every person I saw. It only lasted about an hour, but it completely changed the way I think of myself, the way I think of the soul, the way I think of the universe. I understood in that experience that we as souls are made from the energy of unconditional love. And that turned out to be a very important understanding, because when I went on to research people's pre-birth plans for the books, every plan I looked at was based on complete unconditional love. And the way that I knew I was finding accurate information was because of that experience that I had walking down the street that day, where I felt unconditional love for every person I saw. It told me that the life plan is in fact based on unconditional love. If I had not had that experience, I would still have found the same result in my research, but I would have no way of knowing personally whether it was true or not. So I feel like the universe gifted me with a miraculous experience, which I really needed in order to do the work I went on to do.
Wow, we are so just glad that that happened. I think all of us, for the book that really came out through you, you've been able to touch so many lives. So friends, I would request you to actually put all your questions in the Q&A section. So as we talk, I will take your questions in the second half. So Rob, tell me, as we talk about that, how every challenge, I mean, we have planned somewhere things that have happened in our life. All of us collectively are facing this challenge right now, this pandemic. And have you kind of also received any guidance about this? Is this something that we have planned collectively? What is the whole purpose of, this suffering, this challenge that, we are going through as a community?
Well, actually on my website, yoursoulsplan.com, there's a special channeling that a friend of mine did about the pandemic. And you can go there and read that if you would like to. The channeled consciousness is a collective of ascended masters. And it's quite a long channeling, but the gist of what they say is that this is a unifying experience for humanity. In other words, everybody anywhere in the world is touched by it. Whether you have COVID or not, your life is touched by this pandemic. And so it's something that if we work with it wisely and lovingly, it can bring all of humanity together. It's a shared experience. So rather than be in resistance to it, we should be looking for what we can learn from it. And hopefully over time, it will be something that brings people together. Now, when you ask whether or not it was planned, you have to define what you mean by the word planned. What I found in my research for the two books, planned very rarely means planned as a certainty. It means planned as a potential the vast majority of the time. There are some things that are planned as a certainty. For example, your choice of parents. Obviously, once you're born, you can't change that. Your parents are who they are. Or if you plan, say, to have a physical handicap from birth that can't be treated by medical science, which is something you would know before coming into body, then short of a miracle, you will have that physical handicap for your lifetime. So there are some things that are written in stone like that, but not very much. Most things are set up as potentials, probabilities of varying degrees, and whether or not it manifests depends upon your free will decisions. And that's why the earth is a great school for learning, because you see the results of your free will decisions. If everything were planned as a certainty, we would all be automatons and there would be no true learning taking place.
Yeah, yeah. So that brings me to the next question. Sometimes when we are in a situation when we have a particular challenge or suffering, and we don't know right now our life plan. And of course, when we are in a situation, we tend to feel all kind of emotions. How do we actually firstly come out to not suffer so badly with that? And also, how do we open up to our purpose or our soul's plan?
The way to suffer less or suffer not at all is to eliminate resistance. In other words, it's not what is occurring that actually causes the suffering, it's your resistance to what is occurring. So do anything you can do to minimize your resistance. The way you can work with pre-birth planning to minimize your resistance is simply to ask the following question. If I planned this, whatever it might be, why might I have done that? And when you ask that question, even if you don't believe in pre-birth planning, that question will take you to an exploration of deeper meaning. And the more that you find deeper meaning in whatever is happening, the greater your acceptance, the less your resistance, and the less your suffering. Now, in terms of how can you find out your soul plan for a lifetime, there are a lot of ways to get insight into what you planned before you were born. I'm a little bit biased because I'm a hypnotist and I practice something called a between lives soul regression, also known as a life between lives regression. In my opinion, that is the single most powerful way to find out what you planned before you were born. As you mentioned in the introduction, it's a form of hypnosis in which you talk to very wise, loving, non-physical beings who know everything about you, including your life plan. So they can answer any question you ask about your life. And people will come out of a between lives soul regression and they'll say things like, they answered every question I have no more questions about my purpose or my plan. It's really a transformational experience. But not everybody likes to do hypnosis, and some people have difficulty going into trance. If you prefer not to do hypnosis, there are many, many other ways to gain insight into your life purpose and plan. Astrology, numerology, palmistry, iridology, Chinese face reading, automatic writing, dream work, meditation, the Michael system, which is a body of channeled literature talking about life plan relative to soul age and soul archetype. So there's a whole bunch of things there that I just listed, and any one of them could tell you quite a bit about your life plan. It's really just a matter of personal preference, which one you want to explore.
So Rob, as you would have been making the transition from being the corporate person, I want you to actually share, did you have fears, insecurities, how was it, or what helped you to actually make that transition from here to there?
I had a lot of fears and insecurities about it. The main one at the time being, if I stop working in the corporate world and write a book on a full-time basis, how am I going to support myself financially? So that was a big concern. But you know, there's an expression that a writer is somebody who has something to say and who absolutely has to say it. And that expression very much applied to me. This was a burning desire inside me to do this kind of writing. I wasn't even clear at the time where it was coming from, but it was very, very strong. And I felt I have to do this, even if it causes me financial hardship, even if nobody is interested in reading the book after it comes out, I have to do this. Fortunately, it turned out that a lot of people were interested in what I wrote. So things worked out well in that regard. But you know, it took me 3 years on a full-time basis to write that book, the first one. And the whole time I was writing, I had no idea if anybody was going to be interested in a single word that I was putting down on the page. So it was a big leap of faith. There was a lot of trust involved. But again, there was just this burning desire that I had to do it. And knowing what I know now, I believe that that desire comes from God or source or the universe, whatever term you would like to use. And I don't think it's something unique to me. I think everybody has desires in their hearts that come from God or source or the universe. And it's the universe's way of maximizing growth, evolution, learning, wisdom for the whole. Everybody has a role to play in that. Everybody has a mission. You just have to be willing to step out and take a risk to fulfill the mission.
Excellent. I really love that when you said the writer has to say it, absolutely has to say it. That just kind of makes sense that it was such a burning desire at that point in time. So thank you for that. So Rob, my next question to you is that when somebody, you said that it's like a flow chart, you know, there are certain challenges which are planned for sure and certain that are not, you know, that's like, where does free will really come there? What are our challenges that we have planned and we probably may not actually get it? How does that really work with your experience?
So when you talk about the flow chart, um, I should back up here and explain for those who haven't read either book. The way that I researched people's pre-birth plans was by working with mediums and channels who in one way or another could find out what somebody planned before they were born. And one of the channels has the ability to go into somebody's pre-birth planning session and hear the conversations that they had when they planned their challenges. Well, she reports that when she goes into somebody's pre-birth planning session, Spirit shows her something that to her looks like an incredibly vast and elaborate flow chart. Well, what is a flow chart? It's a series of decision points. If you do A, then X happens. If you do B, then Y happens. The flow chart that Spirit shows her is the life plan created by the soul, taking into account the personality's free will. So each point in that flow chart is a free will decision on the part of the personality. And depending upon what the personality decides, certain things happen or certain things do not happen. So there's this very elegant, intricate intersection between pre-birth planning and free will decisions. And that's where the true learning occurs. Again, if there were no free will and everything were set in stone, we would be automatons and we would learn nothing.
And how do we know that we are actually on the right path?
It's really pretty simple, and it's so simple people tend to overlook it or make it harder than it is. Look for feelings of excitement or feelings of joy. Excitement and joy are communications direct from your soul saying, yes, this is the way for you. There's something here for you that you planned before you were born. Another thing you can look for is time distortion, or what some people call the flow state. So probably for everybody listening to this conversation, there's at least one activity that when you do it, you lose track of time, and it will feel to you like only 10 minutes have gone by, and yet when you look at the clock, it will be 2 hours later. Any activity that creates that kind of time distortion for you, there's something there that is part of your pre-birth plan.
Thank you. I think that really makes it very, very simple. Yeah. So Rob, I also loved this. I remember in your book you talking about the three layers of us, where you spoke about the spirit self, the soul self, and the personality. Can you throw a little more light on these three layers and really what is?
Yeah, the spirit self is the highest vibrational level. This is what you would call the level of oneness or unity. It's a level at which all beings are one. Then you come down somewhat in vibration and you get to the level of the individuated soul. That's still an ultra elevated vibration, not quite as high as the level of oneness, but still very high. And then you come down another step in vibration, and it's a big step down, and you get to the level of the personality who's in a body on the third dimension. That's where we appear to be separate from each other. The apparent separation is an illusion created by the limits of the five senses. We're all one ultimately, but for most people, once you come into a physical body and you're dependent upon the five senses for information and input, it will appear to you as though you're a separate being. So those are essentially the three levels. The way I think of it is that the individuated soul is what you could call a spark of God, and the individuated personality is what you could call a spark of the soul. So the personality is a portion of the soul's energy placed into a physical body.
So there's a question where a person is asking, do we discover our plan when it's time, or can we tap into it when we feel we are ready? Is that
I think
also?
both,
Yeah.
I think both of those statements are true. Uh, you can tap into it anytime you feel that you would want to. And go back to that list of things that I said a few minutes ago. There are many, many ways to find out what you planned before you were born. But even if you are not making conscious efforts to figure out what your life plan is, as long as you follow feelings of excitement and joy, you will quite naturally end up fulfilling your plan. So there are many, many people who never hear of the idea of pre-birth planning. And if they did hear of it, they might not believe in it, but they are following their path because they're following their excitement, they're following their joy, they're following their heart's desires. Those people will end up fulfilling their plan just as well as somebody who does a between lives regression and asks specific questions of the Council of Elders.
Oh, that's interesting. So have you come across people who actually have not been into this and still kind of have fulfilled their plan? As in, have you met people and got to know that through some sessions, or is that something?
And this is more of an intuitive observation. When I think of the people I've met over the course of my lifetime, people in my family, people who are my best friends, there are many, many people in those groups who I feel are beautifully fulfilling their pre-birth plan, but many of them, in fact, I would say most of them, don't even believe in the idea of pre-birth planning. But you don't have to believe in it in order to fulfill your plan. All you have to do is follow your excitement and follow your joy.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you for that. And Rob, in the sessions, now that you're doing this work for so long, I'm actually curious, do you still kind of get surprised when somebody's pre-birth plan opens up? And, does it still happen that you may feel that why would somebody plan that? And even that kind of a challenge seems to be planned. So are there still surprises that you keep having?
There are some surprises, but not a very large number. And the reason it's not a large number is that there are a small number of basic fundamental reasons why people plan challenges before they're born. And just to list them quickly, it's balancing and releasing karma, healing, being of service to others, experiencing contrast, and correcting false beliefs or false feelings about the self. And then under the subset of service to others, a lot of the pre-birth planning has to do with cultivating certain qualities that are important to the soul that I refer to as divine virtues. Things like compassion, unconditional love, empathy, patience, faith, trust, and so on. So you've got about 6 main reasons there why people plan challenges before they're born. And those reasons underlie very, very different kinds of challenges. So regardless of what the challenge is, what we find when we go into people's pre-birth planning sessions, or we do the channelings, the mediumship, or the between lives regressions, underlying very different sorts of challenges are these basic reasons. And those things tie humanity together, basically. We're all here learning the same kinds of things. The manifestation, the form that it takes varies considerably, but the underlying lessons are the same. And actually, if you distill the underlying lessons, you can get to one simple common denominator, and that is we're here learning how to better give and receive love. That's the bottom line underlying every life plan and every form of lesson. We're learning how to better give and receive love.
Rob, can you actually say a little more about when you say experiencing contrast and also letting go of the false beliefs? Can you tell a little more about these two?
So when I talk about experiencing contrast, the non-physical realm that we come from, as I understand it, is a realm of complete unconditional love. And based upon my own spiritual experiences, I know firsthand that the soul is made from the energy of unconditional love. So if you think about that, the soul, which is unconditional love, is in a realm only of unconditional love. That means that we as souls experience no contrast to ourselves, which in turn means we don't fully understand or appreciate who or what we are. We don't fully understand what it means to be a being made from the energy of unconditional love. So I think what we as souls are doing here on the physical plane is that in many cases we have come for the experience of what you could call the not love, the contrast. Because through the experience of the contrast, by the time you go home at the end of a physical lifetime, you understand much more deeply what unconditional love is, which means you understand much more deeply who you are as a soul made from unconditional love. That's the gist of experiencing contrast. Correcting false beliefs and feelings about the self, what happens there is that just about everybody has had at least one past life, and usually many, in which certain things happen that cause them to pick up a false belief or a false feeling. By false, I mean false from the perspective of the soul. The common false beliefs are that one is powerless, or one is unworthy, or one is worthless. If you believe or feel that about yourself, to your soul that will feel discordant, and the soul will want to heal or clear the false belief or the false feeling. The way that's done in the third dimension is that you draw to yourself experiences that seem on the surface to confirm the false belief or the false feeling. The reason that is actually helpful, if you work with it wisely, is that it calls your attention to the false belief, which very often is at a subconscious level until you see it manifesting around you in different forms. And then you start to piece it together. You start to think, okay, if this kind of experience keeps coming to me again and again, what must I believe that is out picturing in the world around me, so to speak? And then you realize, oh, okay, I have a belief that I'm powerless or unworthy or worthless. Now that I know that, I can work on healing the false belief. So the third dimension is just calling your attention to what's already within your consciousness, but you might not know that it's there until the world points it out to you.
Wow, thank you. So one of the participants is asking us, why would somebody choose to lose parents at a very early age and go through the difficulty of absence of parental love?
There could be a lot of different reasons for that. A lot of it has to do with what I referred to a few minutes ago as qualities that are important to the soul that I refer to as divine virtues. So which virtues could come out of losing parents at a young age? Well, potentially a lot of self-love, because if your parents aren't there to provide love for you when you're young, then it puts you in a situation that gives you the opportunity and the motivation to learn to love yourself. Self-love is one of the divine virtues that has come up again and again in the research that I do. Another virtue that would come out of an experience like that potentially would be compassion. You know, any hardship that breaks your heart open, so to speak, creates fertile ground for cultivating compassion. And then there are many, many other virtues that could come out of it as well. Empathy would be a big one. Potentially trust and faith, both in yourself and in a loving God or a loving universe. You know, when your parents aren't there to give love to you, you start to look for love in other sources, and potentially spirit or God, whatever term you want to use, that could be a great source of love for you, and therefore it's a way to cultivate faith and trust.
Thank you, Rob. So, Rob, there's this another question. This person is asking, in my life, the challenge is that I'm not able to make a decent living with my highest creative potential. And going back to other ways of making a living, which seemed unsatisfying. So she's also been in a corporate career before, and she's left that, and she wants to kind of be more, doing all this kind of work. She's also a Dr. Newton student. But again, she's not able to make a decent living out of this. So how can she shift the energy? She feels stuck in a particular way in that.
Yeah, this was a question that I asked Spirit in channeling sessions that were done for me when I first started down the path to writing Your Soul's Plan. And what Spirit said to me is that you have to make a courageous decision to perhaps leave whatever kind of work you're doing. In my case, leave the corporate world and start working on a book. But then Spirit said, what you also have to do is continue to make one courageous decision after another after another. And I think this is where some people get lost, because they'll make one initial courageous decision, but then they'll follow it up with some fear-based decisions. Well, the universe always supports a courageous decision, but you have to keep making one after another in order to eventually get where you want to go. If you make one initial courageous decision and then follow it up with fear-based decisions, you end up undermining yourself. So that was basically what Spirit said to me when I started down this path. And I followed that advice. I tried to make one courageous decision after another after another.
I think that makes so much sense for a lot of us, because yes, a lot of people I know are kind of trying to do things that are no longer satisfying them. There's another person, he's asking, you did not like your sales job till you got into the spiritual work. Were you deviating from your life plan, or was it a part of your life plan? And if yes, then what was the purpose of doing something that you did not like to do?
My sense of my particular life plan is that the first 40 years were left pretty much open for me to explore whatever I, at the level of the personality, wanted to explore. But at age 40, which is very significant in numerology, the number 40, that's when I had the transcendent experience of divine love for all people. And that put me on the path to doing the work that I'm doing now. So the mission kicked in at a very specific time. But that first 40 years, I feel strongly, was left open for me to do whatever I wanted to do. And that was really an unpleasant experience, because I didn't feel called to do anything in particular for the first 40 years. Ended up in the corporate sector, which was not at all a good fit for me. But that turned out to be a learning experience, contrast once again. I learned more about who I am by doing work that was not representative of who I am. And so when the mission kicked in at the age of 40, I was very receptive to it and very ready for it. And I think that was the purpose that was served by those first 40 years.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Rob, another person is asking, how do we get in touch with our spirit guides?
There are a number of ways to do that. Basically, what you want to do is anything that raises your vibration. So that's the way that mediumship, for example, works. The guides or the masters, the angels, whoever is being channeled, they're up here at a very high vibration. The personality is down here at a lower vibration. The medium will raise their vibration to the middle point. The guides lower their vibration somewhat and they meet in the middle. Then the communication can take place. So anything at all that raises your vibration, anything that creates feelings of joy, happiness, gratitude, love, compassion, anything like that. Meditation is a particularly good way to contact your guides. Before you start meditating, speak out loud to your guides, pose one question. So it might be, for example, what is my life plan? And then just let your mind go quiet as much as it will during the meditation. It's not so much that you're going to hear your guides talk to you, although that could happen, but a much more common experience is that during the periods of the meditation when your mind is quiet, that gives your guides an opportunity to plant a seed in your consciousness. And the seed can germinate days, weeks, or even months down the road. So some time after the meditation is over, and it might be quite a bit of time, you will just come into some great insight about your life plan or whatever the question was that you asked. You may not be able to identify that the seed was planted in a meditation weeks or months ago, and that's fine. Your guides don't need you to know that or give them credit, but it will in fact be the case that the seed was planted by your guides in that meditation, and now this insight that you've come into is the result of the question you asked before you started meditating. Also, dream work is a very good way to hear from your guides. Before you go to bed at night, speak out loud to your guides, ask one question. So again, it might be, what is my life plan? Ask for a dream that answers the question. Also ask, and this is very important, that the dream be easy to understand, and ask for help remembering the dream. And if you phrase it that way, you'll get dreams that are relatively easy to understand. And what I've found in my own experience is that sometimes my guides will wake me up right after a dream ends so that I will remember it. Because if I don't wake up, then by the time I wake up naturally in the morning, the memory of the dream is often lost. But if they wake me up immediately after the dream, then I can write it down or just make a mental note to remember it.
That's really helpful. Thank you. So, Rob, there is Monica here. She's asking, I want to know why I have planned a difficult life in which I tried for 18 years to have a good family life, but I have failed. And now my husband is at a stage on bed. He's in coma. I have lost all hope of a complete family life. And what's the reason my children are having a life of suffering?
You know, it would be impossible for me to answer that question without knowing a lot more about this particular person. But again, coming back to the main reasons why we plan challenges, it could be something karmic that is being balanced or released. And by the way, balancing and releasing karma are two different things. Balancing karma means you choose to have a new experience that offsets energetically a previous experience. Releasing karma refers to healing the underlying tendency that created the karma in the first place. So it could be something karmic like that. It could have to do with healing unhealed energies from past lives that were brought into the body for the purpose of healing them in this lifetime. It could have something to do with service to others, which often involves cultivating the divine virtues. Contrast, once again, or correcting false beliefs about the self. Basically, the question you want to ask if you're trying to figure out why something is happening, don't say to yourself, why is this happening to me? But rather say to yourself, why is this happening for me? And when you phrase the question like that, it will take you eventually to the answer you're looking for.
That's really helpful. And a few other questions which are of a similar kind. So I'm just going to leave them because I think in this answer, you've really answered all of them. So Gaurav is asking, can you let us know how to, and if that is possible, to self-regress oneself into the life between life space and connect to the guides? Also, what strategy needs to be in place to do that?
So, as far as I know, there are no recordings of between lives hypnotic inductions, but there are certainly many. Get yourself one CD or MP3 recording of a past life regression. Work with it multiple times until you succeed at getting yourself into a past life. And then when you do, when the recording ends, which presumably will be at the end of the past life, you keep going. So you set an intention for your consciousness to leave the body in the death scene in the past life and cross back over to the other side. When you get there, call for one of your guides to come and greet you. Ask the guide any questions you have about why you were shown that particular past life, why it's important for you to know about it at this particular time, and how it affected the plan for your current lifetime. And then ask your guide to take you to the Council of Elders. One of the things, excuse me, one of the things the council says most often to my clients is, you all have the ability to come to us on your own, and we will be happy to talk with you anytime you do. So this would be a way that you could do that. And I would encourage you to believe in your ability to do it. The more that you believe in your ability to do it, the more likely it is that you will actually be able to do it.
Thank you, Rob. So Rob, there are other questions from two people who are asking, why would a soul actually plan to have a disability, a physical or an intellectual disability? What could be the reason behind that?
A lot of times that is a karmic balancing for a relationship that took place in a past life. So in other words, two people had a past life together in which one had a disability and the other person was that person's caregiver. And then at the end of that lifetime, when they crossed back over to the other side, those two people had their life review, as we all do at the end of a lifetime. And they may have had a sense of unbalanced energy around that relationship. In other words, when they see it replayed in the life review, there's a feeling of incompletion. There's a feeling that there's more here for us to learn from this kind of experience. Well, the feeling of incompletion is the karma. If there's no feeling of incompletion, then there's no karma and you would go on to do something else. But let's say that there is this feeling of incompletion, then you need to balance it karmically. And the easiest way to do that is to trade places. So the person who was the caregiver now plans the life challenge of physical illness, and the person who had the illness or the disability in the past life now plans the life challenge of caregiving. Frequently, it's a balancing like that.
Thank you. And Anil Balotia ji is here. He says he's an ardent follower of your work. So continuing, he's also asked something on karma. But another point that he's asking, apart from what you answered, is that do we choose souls primarily to balance our karma, or do other souls also agree because it needs to be done the same? As in, is it both from both sides, if I'm understanding it rightly? Or is it that, like you said, there are two people where something is imbalanced? Or is it that I need it and then I go to somebody else and ask, would you be willing to do that for me?
It could be either, and both of those things happen quite a bit. For example, in my first book, Your Soul's Plan, there's a chapter about the pre-birth planning of drug addiction. And the story there is about a young American man who plans before he's born of a heroin addiction. So he plans that for purposes of his own. And then he goes to another soul in the pre-birth planning process who he would like to be his mother in this lifetime. And we find out that the two of them had shared many lives together. There was a lot of love already established between them and a lot of trust as well. And so he goes to her in the pre-birth planning and says essentially, would you be the mother who shepherds me through this very difficult experience of a heroin addiction? Well, we find out that she is so evolved, she's actually done on the earth plane. She doesn't need to come back for anything. But because she loves him so much, and because he asks her to come back and be his mother, she agrees to come back into body and play that role, even though she could go on to do something completely different now. So in that case, it's not for her growth or learning. It's simply an act of service on her part because this other soul asked her to play that particular role.
Thank you, Rob. And Harsha is asking, I've been experiencing resistance due to issue of lack of trust and wanting more clarity and taking decision out of discernment, wanting to avoid the previous patterns of victim consciousness. Free will and thy will be done, which would be better between these two. Often I find myself, free will is said to be ego bound, often projected by people or decision influencers, also memories tainted from previous experiences. How does one take balanced decision keeping these two aspects in mind?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. You know, when you're making free will decisions, ideally you want the decision to come from your heart, from your soul, from the highest level possible, not from the ego. Look at the feelings that you're feeling when you think about taking different courses of action. So if the predominant feeling is one of fear, then you're going to be more likely to make an ego-based decision, which in the long run will not work out particularly well. If the underlying feeling is one of joy or excitement, then it's a desire that is coming from your soul, and the decision is likely to work out well in the long run. There's actually a very simple technique that you can use to help with this. Get a coin and say to yourself, it helps with binary decisions. So let's say you're trying to decide whether to do something or not to do something. Those are the only options. So you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to flip this coin, and if it comes up heads, I'm going to do whatever it is. If the coin comes up tails, I'm not going to do whatever it is. And then you flip the coin, and what you're looking for is the instant you see whether it's heads or tails, look for the feeling that arises within you before your mind thinks any particular thought. And if the feeling is one of fear, then you know that that particular course of action is coming from the ego and not the best choice. If the feeling is one of excitement or joy, then you know that that particular course of action is coming from the soul, and it probably is a very good choice.
That's a really cool and simple one. Thank you, Rob, for that. Okay, so Kiran is asking, all that we think and wish in our life, does that become a part of our next life's plan? If not, when exactly do we plan? Does it happen subconsciously too?
As I understand it, it could very well become a part of your next lifetime if you choose to make it part of your next lifetime when you do the pre-birth planning. So the planning, there's what I refer to as an arc of lives. An arc of lives meaning a series of lifetimes in which you're working on a particular lesson or lessons. And when you've experienced whatever you want to experience and learned whatever you want to learn about those particular lessons, then that arc of lives comes to an end, and you go on to another arc of lives in which you will explore some other completely different kinds of lessons. So the pre-birth planning often takes into account where you are within an arc of lifetimes. In other words, what you still want to learn about whatever lessons you've been exploring. And those are influenced by your feelings during the previous incarnation. But it's more important how you feel when the lifetime is over and you see it replayed in front of you in the life review. If you have a feeling of completion in the life review, you'll probably go on to learn something else. If you have that feeling of incompletion, then you're going to stay within that arc of lifetimes and plan more experiences to go deeper into the lessons you've already been working on.
Thank you. And another person is asking that if we like doing too many things, if we are happy doing a lot of things, how do we decide what is our real purpose?
Again, look for feelings of excitement or joy. Also look for feelings of dissatisfaction that come up if you stop doing a particular activity. If it's something that is really meaningful to your soul, there's probably going to be this nagging sense of, I should still be doing that, or I would like to still be doing that. If you step away from something and yet you continue to think about it, you miss it, you wish that it were still part of your life, that's your soul giving you a little nudge saying, this is important, go back and continue with it.
Rob, another person is asking, why would people do suicide? Is it soul plan? And what to really understand from that?
So in my second book, Your Soul's Gift, there's an entire chapter about the pre-birth planning of suicide. And a lot of that chapter is me talking to Jesus in a channeling. I ask him toward the beginning of the channeling, is suicide planned by people before they're born? And he says that it is never planned as a certainty, but it is planned as a possibility or sometimes a probability, or rarely a probability so high as to be almost certain, but never as a 100% certainty. And in terms of why would anybody plan that, the story in that particular chapter is about a young man who, in previous lives, certain things happened that he was not able to heal. And so he's bringing back into body unhealed energies for the purpose of healing them. And it was foreseen in his pre-birth planning session that these unhealed energies would cause tremendous depression and anxiety, so much so that a suicide was highly likely. Now you might say, why would anybody undertake a life plan like that? Some souls are very ambitious. They want to accomplish a lot in a particular lifetime. Also, your perspective from the other side is very different than your perspective once you get into body. You know, when you're planning a lifetime, you know that a lifetime is very short, that nobody is permanently harmed by anything that happens here, and yet the wisdom becomes part of your soul literally for all eternity. So from that perspective, that a lifetime is very brief, nobody is permanently harmed, and yet the wisdom will be part of you for all eternity. From that perspective, it actually does make sense that some souls would choose very, very big challenges, even though they know it's likely to lead to a suicide.
Thank you, Rob. And friends, there are a few other questions. I know that the answers to those, some challenges, why do they happen? The answers are there on his website, in his books. So because of the shortage of time, I think I'll not take those ones. I'll give priority to the questions which are not there in the book. So somebody is asking, how does one release karma?
You have to do a lot of self-introspection and identify the underlying tendencies that are causing you to create whatever karma it is. Very often it will mean that you're making fear-based decisions. So if you recognize that, you can do whatever you need to do to heal the underlying fear, or if you're not able to heal it, at least develop enough self-awareness around it that you won't express it. You won't make decisions based upon the unhealed fear. This is a very good question to ask the Council of Elders in a between lives soul regression. The council would be able to tell you quite specifically what is causing, what you need to do to release the karma. I would take it to the council in a between lives regression.
Thank you, Rob. And Priya is asking, sometimes when people go through psychiatric challenges like schizophrenia or bipolar, where they are going through maniac episodes, it leads to a lot of suffering for the family members. It becomes very difficult to choose the path of karma or your own mental stability. And how can looking at the soul plan help in this case, especially for caretakers of the person who are going through the mental illness?
That is a very good question. I would suggest that you read the chapter about the pre-birth planning of mental illness that's in my second book, Your Soul's Gift. Because once you understand why mental illness is planned, that will reduce your resistance to it and make it a lot easier to accept. The person who is the subject of that chapter in Your Soul's Gift, the story there is that starting at a very young age in childhood and continuing well into mid-adulthood, this particular woman had an experience in which if she had a nightmare while she was asleep at night, when she woke up in the morning, it would appear to her that the nightmare was continuing. So for example, if she dreamt of a monster attacking her, when she woke up in the morning, she would actually see the monster in her bedroom about to attack her. So it was a form of psychosis that was tremendously difficult to live with, not just for her, but later in life for her husband as well. And what we found out when we looked at her pre-birth planning is that she was processing unhealed energies on behalf of parallel selves in parallel dimensions. So to the extent that she could heal the mental illness, she was also healing these parallel selves in these parallel dimensions. It was a form of service. It takes a tremendous amount of courage to plan to do something like that. But she was successful. She found ways to heal this form of psychosis. It's not a problem in her life anymore. And I would imagine there's tremendous healing for the parallel selves in the parallel dimensions.
Wow, that's really insightful, Rob. Thank you so much for that. Rob, I'm going to leave out a few other questions. I know we are close to the time to 9 p.m. already. But I realized that you were going to share some insights, some tips that people could actually take back from here. You think it's time for you to already do that?
Are you referring to the different ways to find out about a pre-birth plan?
Yes, yes.
Well, I'll mention those again. There's a surprisingly large number, most of which have nothing to do with hypnosis. The one that's hypnosis is the between life soul regression that I practice as a hypnotist. But the others are palmistry, astrology, iridology, numerology, Chinese face reading, the Michael system, a body of channel literature that talks about life plan relative to soul age and soul archetype, dream work, meditation, automatic writing. Any of those things, any one by itself could give you great insight into your pre-birth plan. And if you pursue more than one, you would have even more opportunity to find out about your pre-birth plan. So it's really just a question of which technique or method most resonates with you. Trust the law of resonance. Trust that feeling of resonance, because that is your soul guiding you to find out about your life plan in whatever way is best for you.
So Rob, if you may allow, there's one very interesting question that's come. Leena ji is asking, my husband had a rebirth after being declared dead. He has recovered miraculously, except the memories are all messed up. What would be his agenda to have a comeback? How do I help as a spouse? I'm totally surrendered to the goodness of the universe, hence have no wife or anything. This is part of my life experience. I understand to be married to a man I no longer recognize.
So this man had a near-death experience?
Yeah.
Near-death experiences, as I understand it, are planned before birth. And they're planned as a means of triggering a spiritual awakening and putting a person on a completely different path in life. It could very well be that the marriage was planned before birth to be temporary. Many marriages are planned before birth to be temporary. You know, at the level of the personality, we look at that as a failure. We say divorce is a failure, it's a bad thing. From the soul level, that is not at all the case. Many marriages are planned to be temporary because they serve whatever purpose they serve in a certain period of time. And then it's for the highest good of both parties to go in a different direction. That could possibly be the case here. The way to find out for sure, again, would be to do a between lives regression, talk to the Council of Elders, ask them, why was this near-death experience planned before this person was born? They would be able to tell you with certainty and specificity.
Thank you so much, Rob. And I've had a wonderful time, Rob. Thank you so much. A lot of beautiful tips that I'm taking. I'm sure all our viewers also are. Particularly the courage, 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 courage after courage after courage. And the coin bit that you mentioned, that was an amazing tip also. So friends, if you would like to explore no more of Rob's work, in our chat, we've put his website details, his book names, I guess also. And you may, please follow him also. Our website, our social media handles, all of them have been put up. So thank you so much, Rob, for joining us and for your valuable time. We are very, very, very grateful for your presence. So honored to have you join us.
It's been a pleasure for me, and thank you for inviting me. And I hope, as we were talking about before we started the interview, I hope to come to India sometime in the next few years.
Yes, absolutely. I think I was just sharing with you how actually it was magical that I got your message when I thought about having you. So I think your intention, the seed has been planted today. So many people are witness, and we are all kind of now waiting to receive you in India.
Thank
Hope
you.
to see you soon. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, friends, for joining us. Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a wonderful evening to all those in India and a wonderful day. Thank you, Rob. Bye-bye.